Hey, welcome to our 100th episode of 2Debate, the podcast of debates with your fabulous clone number 753, aka Sebastian. How are you doing today?
393.
Okay.
Yeah, I still haven't retired. 393. He's been going on for the past 4 years, still going on strong.
People who haven't been around from beginning have no idea what that weird reference means, right? So little piece of explanation here. Sebastian claims that he's immortal, mainly because he's cloning himself. That's actually what we had in one of our debates. We discussed if it should be legal and desirable even to clone yourself. Yeah, so welcome, Sebastian. And I'm, of course, the other host of this beautiful debating podcast, Dirk, not a clone, not immortal.
The non-cloned,
yes.
The unique, the very special, the European, the German.
Well, you're the Swiss. You're the future Swiss.
Not yet.
Future Swiss. Working on it. Future Swiss, prior French, Polish dude. Or do you have clones in each of these countries, by the way? Like a version of you
have
Sebastian Chinsky? No, Chinsky. Sebastian Chinsky in Poland and Sebastian Clement in France.
You'd be surprised. I have people who have exactly the same names, the same name as I do. Thankfully, I've added my mother's maiden name, Clement, which makes it unique.
Okay.
Thankfully, but you'd be surprised. Actually, there's not just one, but a couple or more people on this planet who are still alive and actually younger than me who have the exact same name. So even though I have almost no vowels in my family name, it is still apparently widespread to not just one. What about you?
Well,
are you unique?
I'm
special?
Unique. I don't clone myself. I'm not very special, but definitely unique. And still German. Intend to stay German for a while longer. At the very least until the end of that lockdown, right?
Speaking of citizenship, I discovered that I believe it was until 1999 that Germany did not. In 1999, Germany allowed its citizens to have a dual citizenship.
Yep.
It's one of the last countries in Europe to open up. In Switzerland, it was 92, and since then it's led to a surge in requests for citizenship. But until then, 92 in Switzerland, 99 in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, it was actually not possible. I did not know this.
And I do have to say, dual citizenship would have been a fabulous debating topic, right? So maybe before we jump into this, let's explain our listeners really briefly what we are up to today, because the 100th episode is a special episode. So we are not in it for debate.
It's a special episode, especially, I don't know if you noticed this, Dirk. It's exactly 4 years,
yes,
almost to the day that we released the first episode. I know it sounds insane, but if you look at the date of the release, it was 1st of December for the welcoming to our new podcast, and the 15th of December for the very first episode. And we're recording this today, 16th of December 2020, 4 years down the road. Woohoo! Happy birthday to us.
4 years.
Just to announce that we're shutting down shop. Is that it?
Well, for all those who are scared now that we might just do that, no. But we have a bit of appetite for change, right? So
change is scary.
And change is scary.
Change is frightening.
Yes. But the good thing is,
uncertainty. 2020 was uncertain enough and risky enough and scary enough.
Yeah, we may consider swapping your clone for some other clone, but the listeners will not notice. Same voice.
Is this a sexist comment? Are you saying you're not happy with the dude, as you said earlier on, when I thought this was a non-gendered debate? Do you want to go back to episode number 49 when we said quotas help diversity? Really? Let me refresh your memory, my dear friend, and what you said back then.
Speaking of which, refreshing your memory, shall we have a look at that weird leaderboard that we took so seriously for the first half? And where are we?
I did look at it.
And who won?
I don't know if it was. I didn't look at the bottom. I look at the top score, and I'm humble enough to say that my clone won.
Yeah. So overall, we released 99 debates over the years. and you won by 3 debates. I would say we are pretty even, right? It's like it was a close call, a close race.
Dirk, it's just like elections. Yes, it was close, but there's one winner, and I am sorry.
Yeah, but of course, if you measure by the number of votes, which is an alternative measurement that the dashboard presents, then I win with 11 more votes.
Don't try the popular vote. Do not try that on me. I've heard that trick before. It is only the Electoral College that matters. Where does the debate go and where is it leaning? The majority went to me.
Speaking of which, right, we started our podcast in the year Trump was elected, and we end our podcast, or no, we don't end it. We end this season of this podcast in the year he was voted out of office. And may I say so, he has been now voted out of office for like almost 3 weeks. We watched him losing that election over and over and over again for a couple of weeks now. And he was a close friend of the podcast. We kind of got, I don't know how many, but we probably got like 20 or so debates that were somehow inspired by actions Trump decided to take during his time in office. He was a constant theme in all the other debates. He was a constant theme as well. So basically, if you've not listened to our previous debates, I encourage you to listen to debate number 27. Go back on our website or in your favorite podcast app when we actually had Donald Trump on our podcast. Teasing. Oh no, that was about fake news, wasn't it? Shit. Yes, it was about fake news. We talked about fake news.
I thought you were going to say you thought about inviting Donald Trump or his sons or his daughter to this podcast. Thank you for being so kind to me.
We called out so many times and he never answered.
Aww. And that's a perfect transition to explain what we're going to do today, to explain how we're wrapping up that very long 4-year season. Yes. What are we doing today?
We are going over our debates a little bit. So looking at the themes that we saw, looking at maybe also some of the ideas that we played around with. Some of the debates stuck with us. Some of the debates, looking through the back catalog, I had a couple of debates where I looked at it and like, what? We discussed this? I don't recall what we actually talked about. Maybe I should re-listen to it. But others were actually very present for me. Maybe we also talk a little bit about favorite or least favorites or special episodes. I don't know. Maybe we get around to this. Yeah. Let's go down memory lane. The very first debate was inspired by Elon Musk, right?
That was the first one, Mars. Is it worth going to the planet Mars? And what is interesting is that 4 years down the road, we're actually getting a little bit closer to it, right? The objective remains the same. It has not wavered, which sometimes, with this big lofty goals, sometimes you just announce them and then it gets delayed further and further. And I believe the schedule is still roughly the same. He had mentioned 4 years ago to be on the planet by 2024. I think it's 2025 now, his latest announcement. I saw this a few weeks ago, but it's still roughly on schedule. So that's, I think, an interesting one. Any thoughts on that one?
I do think I remember that it's not exactly up to him because it also depends a little bit on where Mars is at any given point. I do believe I remember that Mars is close to Earth at that time. That's why
the window of opportunity. Indeed, I think every 2 years the both planets have the shortest distance between them. So that's correct.
Yes. So I
know you started with the very first one, but we also want to tease our listeners by telling them that after we go through memory lane and through our past debates, we'll give some insights into what we'll do next year.
Yes.
Right. So you have to stay tuned until the end to know what's coming up.
And since we align with the U.S. presidencies, we kind of have the fixed idea that we may start the next season on the inauguration day. Right,
this is the inauguration day of season 2 of 2Debate. Don't miss it. And the date is in all your calendars, 20th of January, 2021.
Yeah, and it's going to be the largest crowd ever, period.
Of course.
Yes.
By the way, although I used to be a Catholic, not a believer anymore, but 20th of January, Dirk, you shall know that this is the celebration of a saint.
Whose one?
Name?
Holy Sebastian?
It is Saint Sebastian, 20th of January.
Wow.
Who was a martyr in the Roman Empire and was claiming his faith, and is known to have been struck by arrows, or killed by arrows from his own soldiers. He was army, whatever, chief in the Roman Empire, and the guy did not die apparently from the wounds of the arrows. He's often depicted with all these arrows inside his body. He apparently recovered from it. He went back to the emperor and saying, "See, you should repent for your sins." What do you think the emperor did?
Shoot him again?
Yep, shot him again. And he died. So some people called Sebastian are a bit stubborn. You will have noticed.
So so why is he again a saint again? Is it for his intelligence or standing up to the emperor? Or
no,
what?
he was a Catholic, right? He was pushing for the faith of Christianity. So he was put to death for that reason the first time, and the second time, I guess, for just the emperor. Imagine this guy. What? I just shot him. He's back. Oh, go away. Anyway, 20th of January is a date you cannot forget. It's our inauguration, the biggest crowd ever.
Yeah.
And Saint Sebastian, you have to do me a favor and connect back on 20th of January. But we'll explain a bit more towards the end of this episode, what we'll do then. So stay with us. What are the other episodes that are the big themes? Maybe we want to talk about Trump. We mentioned about Trump a little bit. Yeah, we had a few debates about on him.
So yeah, if I type in Trump now in our back catalog and hit the search episode button, I'm finding. Do I see the total number here somewhere? 15 episodes where it had apparently some relation to Trump. And we have such beauties like, let's get rid of diplomatic protocols. That was in preparation of that summit where he met Kim Jong-un, I think.
Correct.
Or we had, should Twitter ban Trump?
That was episode, by the way, number 33.
Yes.
That we recorded a while ago. I'm just giving you the numbers so that if you're interested, if you listen to us and you want to go back to those, you'll find the number very quickly.
Yes. Of all the debates about Trump that we had, the one that I personally find the most interesting is a question that we ask 1 year into Trump's presidency. We ask, is it worth having a Trump? That was the debate we had. 2D27 was that.
Correct.
And now we can, of course, ask ourselves, was it worth having had a Trump?
What do you think? I have a few notes about this.
You back then, you said, you argued for the motion back then. So you said it's worth having a Trump, and I was against it. I still hope that Trump has a net positive effect. Like, he exposed so many weaknesses of not only the US system, but actually all our systems. There are plenty of systems where even European countries can think to themselves, we never thought about this particular idea. Or so maybe it leads to some things being fixed. Also, I think it exposed a lot of divides, not only in the US. So maybe that was worth it. But overall, I would say he did way more damage than good. Under Trump, drone strike killings had a new high. We had a debate about extrajudicial killings, by the way. No other US president killed that many people silently as the Trump administration decided to do.
On that topic, by the way, I also read this morning that he's ordered more executions, capital punishment executions at the federal level than all of the state governors combined. Yeah, it seemed to be a first. I don't know, but just to give a perspective, because maybe in the past the U.S. was putting to death a number of criminals, maybe way more than today. I don't know, but at least from the perspective, it seems it stands out that from the federal level, it has been way more than what the state governors have wanted to do.
He kind of ran on the idea of draining the swamp, and then was the most openly corrupt politician I have ever seen in the US, honestly. Others at least try to hide it, while Trump is basically trying to claim that he's under constant witch hunt, and then thinks out loud about stuff like pre-pardoning himself and his children. I don't think the damage was necessarily worth it, but maybe there's some good that comes from it. I really hope that it will. What is your opinion on it?
I had jotted down the exact same things. So I'm not going to go into the details about exposing the flaws of democracies in particular in the US, but also in general. But there's one more thing, which I think I would stand by my assertion that it is worth to have someone like him in a position of power, especially now that we know he's gone. And if he had continued for another 4 years, then I may have changed my point of view. But now it's maybe possible to fix some of these things before it was completely too late. Specifically, why I think it's worth having someone like him in a position of extreme power, it's because it also emphasizes the number of people who have voted for someone whose lies and corruption have been exposed over 4 years. Despite all this, he's probably the second candidate in the entire US presidential election history to have had as many votes. Even though he lost, he has a point, right? There's no president ever who has gone for a second round of election after being already the president, with 74 million people voting for that person.
I would even go one step further. No president in history, and I would say no democratic leader in the history of the world, mobilized so many people to vote for or against him. So in a way, that was like a triumph and a fest for democracy. And it was also interesting to watch how resilient the system actually proved to be in the end. He was really fighting against it, and the Republicans were in a pickle, right? With a president that just mobilized 70 million people, they couldn't just fight against him. So they basically had to allow him trying to topple that election result. And watching this unfold, it gave me hope that it's actually as resilient as it proved to be. I didn't hold my breath necessarily. I was not sure if this would be the outcome of it, but it looks like actually by now we are getting into calm waters there.
Oh, I wanted to actually raise a point which is separate from the aspect of the resilience of democracy, and that point was highlighting how, despite exposing very openly and very visibly all the lies, the mistruths, the corruption of the administration over the past 4 years, despite that, people are still voting in masses. And I think that the good thing in the story, I think the silver lining is that it exposes that, and the fact that it needs to be addressed. If 74 million people are still voting for someone who's very clearly corrupt and lying thousands of times, and thousands is not an overstatement, is not an exaggeration, then there is a problem somewhere which needs to be addressed, and Trump is just the symbol of it.
I agree.
Yep, I'm glad that he's gone, and I think a lot of people are glad that he's gone, but still 74 million people, plus those who didn't vote, who still support Trump, and people like him, this is a concern, and that needs to be addressed. And this is just a US, not just a US problem. This is also a problem for other democracies where, thankfully, maybe extreme parties are not in a position of power, but we do have these extreme points of views in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, and you need to acknowledge them. You can't just pretend, great, the guy's gone, the problem is gone. No. In fact, it's very, very interesting and very important that we take into account that 50% almost of the population is actually still ready to vote for someone who's that bad. What does this tell us about, first of all, human psychology, but secondly, about preserving essential democratic rights or human rights if you have half the population which is ready to vote for extreme things or extreme people? So I'm not so optimistic, but I think this is the value of having a Trump, I think, and thankfully not having one at the head of the state anymore.
And I think it's worth revisiting some of the debates we had about him, especially in light of changes. So we debated, for instance, if we should preemptively nuke North Korea. Thankfully, we didn't. But I happen to notice that North Korea, I believe, still has nuclear weapons, so he didn't solve for this problem either.
This was, by the way, this is episode 13. And 3.5 years down the road, after we had that debate, the latest research has shown that North Korea has advanced even more quickly in its nuclear weaponry than it was expected. Now, possibly it's because of links to Iran, maybe to Pakistan, maybe to China. Whatever the reason, it is the intelligence in our Western world that it is believed that North Korea is way more advanced in that area. So the problem remains, to your point, Trump is almost a side note at this point because that was a clown showing with a dictator of North Korea. But what do we do? It'll be interesting to see what the UN and the new US administration decide to do on that aspect.
Yeah, I agree. So moving on from Trump, I encourage our listeners to give it a glance and then think of yourself how well those episodes aged. I think they actually held up pretty well. So looking back, I was not completely embarrassed by some of the motions we had. Out of the other big cluster we had, so politics obviously and society was a very big cluster. The other big cluster we had, and that's not a surprise given that we are two white dudes working in a tech company, was our technological future. We talked about cloning, we talked about computer tech, AI, and my personal favorite about all those episodes, on all those episodes was 2D44, which was the motion, flying cars, not underground tunnels, are the future. And that was where you basically were arguing for flying cars. Are you still?
Was I?
Are you holding that position? You still think flying cars are the future, Sebastian?
I think you caught me because I can't remember what I was supporting. And the great value of doing a debate like this, in addition of escaping our filter bubbles, is that it forces us to really adopt aside the point of view that we may not have chosen by default. And the perfect demonstration of this is that I don't even remember which side I was on. I can see pros and cons of both for many of our debates, by the way. No, I don't remember, but why do I think today flying cars? I don't see them. Do you see them outside?
No, me neither. I still think it's a stupid idea, though. But it was a very fun debate. It was a very interesting debate, and were points I really liked. And you said something very important. I still remember how nervous I was hopping on the very first debate we had. And one thing I really quickly learned was that I don't have to play anything or pretend anything in order to debate. The only thing I need to do is I need to think about arguments that would work for me. I learned that there is a valid path of reasoning for pretty much anything that I could get behind. And it made me humble. Before that, I thought when I had arguments laid out, I kind of felt like being on the right side of this. I felt like, oh, I saw facts and this is clearly the right side. Our project forced me to pick the other side, and more often than not, I came out a little bit confused. In the end, it felt like, hey, it's just as valid, and it taught me an important lesson that makes me in my daily routine, in my daily life, in real world arguments. I think I'm better in discussing things, better in understanding people's positions, better in being careful not to judge too quickly and not jump to conclusions. So that was a big learning for me.
That's a totally fair point. I have the exact same impression. In fact, if there's one piece of advice that we can give to our listeners is in your relationships, in your personal relationships, in your work relationships, if you find yourself in a position of stark disagreement with someone, try it for a few minutes. Try to take their point of view and see what if you had to defend that point of view? What would you say? And try to be honest and sincere with the arguments you would put forward. And to your point, Dirk, arguments that are coherent with your value system. And I think it's a very worthwhile exercise. It's not easy when emotions are high, especially in personal relationships, but at least at work and hopefully also in your personal life, you can try this. And indeed the humbles, I think, you and whoever tries that exercise in trying to get a better understanding of the other point of view. In the same realm, by the way, you mentioned flying cars, underground tunnels, and in terms of, I guess, slightly related to this is taxis and car sharing. We had a few debates around robots eating jobs. The share economy is a scam. Would Uber be ever profitable? That was, I think, debate number 83.
I think that's a clear no.
A clear no at the moment. But that was also a number of topics we had around this. Debate 23 was robots eating jobs. 24 is share economy, a scam. And number 83 is Uber. Will Uber ever be profitable?
Is there a debate that you're embarrassed about, or where you wish we never had that, or where you felt awkward about?
No, there's nothing maybe one where I feel my predictions were wrong.
Which was?
You talked about technology, and I have here number 59 and 80. 59 is Facebook is dead. Clearly, Facebook is not dead. That was a couple of years ago. We debated about this. Although, what's interesting is that we also debated episode 80, for those of you who missed that one. Shall we break up Facebook? Now, it's a little bit awkward to have the discussion today when you have increasing loud calls across both sides of the Atlantic calling for big tech to be broken up, including our own company, which we can't really talk about. But that was one where clearly I was wrong because I think debated. I was defending Facebook is dead, but I guess the debate about shall we break it up remains particularly valid. So it'd be interesting to listen to that one again.
Yeah. I have a candidate for a debate I still think is actually, that was a debate worth not having. But it's still in our back catalog. So if people want to listen back to this, whether or not homeopathy is a medicine, that would be my candidate for something that actually...
I didn't want to bring this one up because we talked about it a few times. Because I thought about it when you mentioned, you've always gave arguments which are in line with your value system. And
this one was the exception. Yeah, that was the exception. I really had a hard time with that debate. And
that was
I don't think
one of the very early ones, right? Like in the first 10 episodes, I can't remember.
On the positive side, we had a few fun debates as well. And I would like to call out episode 28, which was Star Wars is overrated, where we talked, where we even debated. In the course of that debate, we came even to Shakespeare as a debating topic, and you made a case that, in your opinion, Shakespeare is overrated as well. And so, if anyone wants to have a little bit of banter in her or his life, this is a good episode to start with it.
And you don't need to know much about Star Wars or Star Trek or these kind of things. Don't worry, you can still listen to it. You just need a very superficial knowledge. In terms of predictions that were completely wrong also, because I remember suggesting that motion. That was February 2018, almost 3 years ago, episode 36. A financial crash is coming. Run.
Yeah.
It's interesting because there was no financial crash since then, but there was a stock market crash earlier this year because of completely unrelated reasons. But are we out of the woods just yet? Are we out of the woods? That is maybe another question to have.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You were about to say something.
Yeah, I was about to say that in episode 94, we come to the end now of our catalog a little bit. Is the world capable of dealing with a global pandemic was the question. And of course, you defended the notion that you defended the thought that we are completely incapable. And I would say the jury is still out on that. It's like we are kind of fight our way through, with some parts of the world doing remarkably well and some parts of the world failing. It's an interesting test case for the various systems we had. Just one little nugget here that I wanted to throw in. I find it very interesting that even dictatorships seem to battle the pandemic in a humanistic way, which I found very interesting to see. Not a single country actually said, like, you know what, let people die, we don't care. Every single country tries to fight this and protect the weak and all that, which is an interesting observation, I think.
What surprises me in hindsight is I think during that debate, I was praising Germany for its handling of the pandemic at the time. And what surprises me is that most countries which were praised for doing okay or well initially turned out to mess it up afterwards, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. Some of the countries which messed it up initially then managed to do a little bit better further down the road. Yeah. And there's a number of examples like this. The ones which were praised were Germany, Switzerland, Taiwan. Taiwan seems to be off the hook and seems to be doing fine. But Germany and Switzerland in the past few months, if you look at the infection rate and the seemingly lack of control by the governments, seems pretty much of a disaster story. Vice versa, maybe France has done it maybe a little bit better. It's not even too sure, maybe like very average in the ranking. Maybe the UK by pushing through the vaccine, in the past few weeks, although they have a surge in infections.
I guess the question is how you measure the success here, right? So
it's simple. Is there anyone left breathing?
Yeah, but even by that measurement, we actually do better than some if we could. So in comparison, I would say in terms of economic crisis and in terms of, say, personal devastation, people not know who don't know how to pay for the rent and food anymore, and all the side effects of an economy shutting down. Many of the examples that you gave, many European countries still do much better than for instance, the US. I mean, it's like in Germany, we have barely more people unemployed than in the Euro crisis, at the height of the Euro crisis, which is a remarkable feat in itself. So I do think this is a discussion that's worth having in probably 1 or 2 years from now, when we have a chance to look back, right?
You mentioned dictatorships. I'm jumping to another one. It's debate number 68, which we talked about 2 years ago, almost February 2019. Time passes. It's crazy. This debate, number 68, was about whether the US and Europe were right to legitimize the self-declared president of Venezuela. And 2 years down the road, there's still no solution there, which is interesting, which shows kind of in hindsight, maybe Europe and the US made a mistake in a way. I'm not saying, of course, that Maduro is any pleasant and friendly character, but what's the point of declaring president someone who's effectively has no power, and it's been 2 years? What does that exactly mean, to say, hey, well done, you're president, but you're not supporting them in any other way, or at least visible way?
Before we touch on our plans for the future, we had a few special episodes as well, and I'd like to call out 2 that were especially special. One was, we had a debate, that was episode 54, that was on the 27th of September in 2018, where we talked about genetic engineering. And we had a student group joining us, explaining to us the value of public information regarding genetic engineering and the power of making this kind of technology basically public domain, right? That was more or less the topic we talked about. That was, I think, a highlight in our podcast that we initially hoped to do more often.
In fact, if you have an interesting point of view on any topic in general, this may be a call to action to you, our listeners. Don't hesitate. Email us. You're all experts of one specific area or field, or you have something to talk about. And if we have a matching interest, then we'd love to invite you as a guest on our next season. So don't hesitate. Email us. It's as simple as that. We don't bite. And
it's maybe easier than ever to hop on a recording. So the other special, which I want to call out, was we had an entire episode talking about rhetoric, like the art of the argument, right? And for that, we invited an expert, the book author Jay Heinrichs.
That was a 1-hour episode from 25th of April 2018. If you want to go back in our archives, it's a 1-hour episode, really one of the fun ones. We have 104 episodes if you add up everything. It's just including specials and the intro and the happy holidays.
Yes, that's right. So I think many podcasts don't even make it to the 100. And I personally, I can say that back then when we were having lunch together and envisioned doing some kind of debating podcast, I wouldn't have guessed that we are debating for 4 years. And it won me a friend over those 4 years. So you're a very, very important part of my life now. Not only, but in the beginning through that podcast. So thank you for debating for 4 years with me. I hope we continue debating going forward.
Likewise. So what are we going to do going forward? You want to share with our listeners what are our plans, and they should tune up on Inauguration Day, January 20th, 2021.
Yeah, birthday of the famous Saint Sebastian, or was it a death day, or what is it? What kind of day is it?
I don't know what does it correspond to, but it's the day when the saint is celebrated.
Whatever day.
Yeah.
Saint Sebastian Day. So we thought, in the beginning, we were very strict in our structure. So we basically had our segments that were always like the backbone of our debating format. And then in the beginning, I started having a little bit of, cutouts, funny jokes, things we played as a nugget at the end of the episode. That was basically, for the first 10 or 20 episodes, the format we had. At some point, because we usually continued discussing after our actual debate. So we would have our debate and then we continued, and the recording obviously continued as well. At some point, I started adding those discussions to our formats, and I heard plenty of comments that people enjoyed our debates, but also enjoyed our discussions that we had after the actual recording. So going forward, we decided that we want to double down on that. We think a little bit more of a free-ranging conversation is maybe worthwhile having. Maybe we can have a better balance of topics that way, have more than one topic per episode is a thought that we have. Maybe, as Sebastian hinted, invite guests into the podcast format. So we will stay true to the idea of having a controversial motion and talk about it, but we will probably free up the structure a little bit, be more conversational in the end. Did I describe it well, Sebastian? What do you think?
Yes. In fact, I also wanted to emphasize the reason why we want to do this is also to kick a new momentum. You may have noticed that we've been a little bit less frequent in releasing our episodes. We used to have a 10-day frequency. I was just checking our stats from 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we had released 60 episodes. So in 2 years, we only released 40 since then. And back then we had 20,000 downloads. So I guess we're maybe around 30,000 today, 40,000, roughly that order of magnitude. So it's not that we didn't get a welcoming reception, I guess, from you, our listeners. And thank you for listening all along or recently, if you've just joined. It's really for us to try and find a new life into this debate format and being maybe, as you said, less structured, less formal. It doesn't prevent us from coming back to anything else or to that format later in time if we want to, but hopefully we'll make things more dynamic and give us a new energy into doing debating and different points of views along the same rough themes that we've covered so far. So that's usually politics, tech, and current affairs, current news, basically.
Yeah. We think about, as I said, we think about having additional voices on the podcast. How that will look in the end depends a little bit on who signs up for it, right? So if you feel like, oh, I would like to be a voice on that podcast, feel free to reach out.
The second little innovation will be having one or two questions at the end of each of our episodes, which will be a bit fun or funny, not necessarily related to the debate at hand, but you'll have to tune in to know what that is about. So yeah, a few innovations, a few improvements here and there to make it a little bit more entertaining. Let's see.
Yes, and about the guests, by the way, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but let me call it out. We are 2 Europeans, 2 men working in tech, both white. So we also hope with the introduction of that concept of having a third host joining in, be that a guest or maybe some people show up more regular. Maybe we turn up having 4 in the end. Who knows? We do want to have people on the show that represent the opposite side of the argument, but also maybe different ways of life, different perspectives, different culture backgrounds. So we want to open this up a little bit more.
All right. I think that's it, right?
I think
we have a nice roundup of our episodes, the 100 episodes that we've recorded. We gave you a teaser of what's to come. So we'll be preparing this for the new year, which hopefully will be a new, optimistic, positive, happy, sane, healthy year for everybody who's listening and those who are not listening, because we wish well.
Yeah. With that, thank you, Sebastian, for debating 100 times with me, or 99 times. And to our listeners, most of our debates age pretty well, so maybe this is a good opportunity to take a look at some of the classics. We go on our holiday break, and we will be back in your ears early January. Or mid-January.
And if you've not listened to previous episodes, of course, you're free to listen to them. It remains free. It will remain free. As you mentioned, I don't think they've aged too much for most of them. And who knows what happens in 2021 before the next crisis, the asteroid crashing down on Earth and destroying all the archives of the internet and beyond. Then maybe you want to listen to us during the holidays.
Or Corona changes and we have a zombie apocalypse after all. Whatever may happen, we will be in your ears on the 20th of January. And thanks a lot. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you to you, Dirk. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.